We're here to celebrate the life of baseball legend Willie Mays, Lou Orlando, Jack Warner, two MLB beat reporters for WFUV Sports. Willie Mays passed away on June 18, 2024. Simply put, he's one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Hall of Famer, 24-time All-Star in 23 seasons, two-time MVP, 660 home runs. You can go through the list. He's one of the greatest center fielders to ever play the game. But probably also a unique impact on New York as well, and we have a cool angle into this when you think about Willie Mays spent a lot of time with the New York Giants in an era where New York baseball had three teams and was very special, and he finishes his career with the New York Mets, appears in the World Series in 1973. So there's a very strong New York tie-in into all of this. But when you have a baseball great and a Hall of Famer, someone that fundamentally changed the game, when someone like him passes away, the league stops and takes notice. In the last couple of weeks, it's been a lot of remembering the life of one of the greatest players that's ever lived.
In my opinion, the greatest outfielder that's ever lived, arguably the greatest player that's ever lived. There's nothing it's honestly tough to speak to the greatness of Willie Mays. He's one of those people where what else can you say about him that hasn't already been said by someone else? His accomplishments are, ranging from far, within baseball and out of baseball, impacted the world in so many incredible ways. And I think one of the things, when we first talked about his passing at FUV, it was on an episode of One-on-One a week or two ago. And one of the first things I said to my co-host was, what were you doing at age 16? Do you remember? Because I think mine was a lot of, I may have been playing some sports, but it was a lot of, video games and going to elementary school. And high school. Sorry, high school. And
education.
Yeah, I know, right? But my point being is, he joined the Negro Leagues when he was 16 years old. He played professional baseball when he was 16 years old for the Birmingham Barons. And to me, that is just absolutely remarkable. And I don't know if anyone could have saw coming, someone that enters the league and is so elite at what they do at that young of an age, just to see it never die, to see it continue. He wasn't one of those people that, the league was too much for him when he first entered and things moved too fast. He was one of the grittiest athletes. There's so many accounts of how hardworking he was and a lot of the different things that he endured throughout his career. And it's just, it's nice because it's obviously there's so many emotions when somebody passes away, but it's nice when it can be a celebration, which I think is very much what the last few weeks have been.
Well, we've put together something very cool for you guys because how much does it matter what we tell you? We never watched Willie Mays play, so how much are we going to talk about? But we put together something really cool. Again, we've got a lot of New York ties here at WFUV, and you have a lot of families that were in New York, remember Willie Mays playing, so we reached out and we have firsthand accounts, stories of people that were alive that watched Willie Mays play and can speak on his impact. And the one that we're going to start with, I think is pretty exciting, and I'm going to let you cue this one up because I know this has a special place in your heart.
It very much does. My grandfather, Barry DeVal, is going to be our first soundbite, an account of the greatness of Willie Mays. He grew up in New Jersey. It was basically a lifelong New Jersey native until he recently, him and my grandmother moved down to South Carolina. But he grew up a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, was around the New York baseball scene all through, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And once he got into more his adult life, he worked as, for several different banks. He was president of banks, was always, very high up within the banks that he worked in. And he tells a very, very special story about meeting Willie Mays during an event that he did where they used to invite athletes for these special events for this bank that he worked for in Stamford, Connecticut. So you're going to get to hear about, my grandfather's firsthand account with Willie, along with some time from earlier in Willie's career when he was in the minors in Trenton, New Jersey. So here you
go. Willie Mays. Never really saw Willie play in person, and I probably should have, but probably the reason I didn't, because back in those days I was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan through and through, and being a member of the Wait Till Next Year club, I didn't have a lot of interest in watching the Giants play. But first of all, I remember Willie coming into Trenton to play for the Trenton Giants, and I knew he had to be special because everybody was talking about Willie's coming to town, and this guy is the best thing that anybody will ever see. He's a great ball player coming out of the black leagues, and everybody will want to see Willie. And when he hit town, everybody was talking about Say Hey Willie. He was the guy, and Trenton was pretty close to us, and he played right there on the circle in Trenton, and I probably should have gotten down there to see one of his games, but it was tough to even get a ticket because he was so popular and everybody was talking about him. Saw him play obviously on TV, and he was a great player. There's no question. His speed and those bucket catches that he made, he was such an exciting player, and he was just an all-around player as hitting and catching and running, and he was certainly goes down as one of the greatest of all times, and no arguments there. I guess the best thing I could say is that I did get to meet Willie and spent time with talking to him and listening to him. And I can tell you a little bit about his personality as he was retired from baseball. When I lived in Stamford, Connecticut, we used to bring athletes in and have money-making appearances there for charity. And once we were able to get Willie to come in to Stamford, and we had a sellout crowd, obviously. And he came in, and we got to chat with him a bit before the doors were open and the crowds came in, and got to know him a bit. And I mean, his personality, his warmth, the kind of person that he was hard to describe. Just a great person. He seemed like he had a smile that was painted on his face. It was just always there and very sincere in talking. He obviously carried some feelings into retirement, watching, because there was a time when baseball players started to receive much higher pay than they were paid back in Willie's days. And the talent that Willie was, my God, I can't even think in today's atmosphere how much they would have to pay Willie Mays. But he didn't receive that kind of money back when he was playing. And he was watching, even in the early days of his retirement, players that weren't of his caliber making much, much higher salaries than he was making. And we would look back at that today and think those salaries were nothing. And that was something that you could tell he held bad feelings about, the fact that he never shared in that kind of money. That came out that day as a lot of kids were brought into the audience by their parents, and the audience was probably more children than parents, although there were a lot of older people that wanted to hear Willie too, but they wanted their kids to meet him. And each place was set with a card on it. It was a picture of Willie making a catch, I think, and on that card included a signature that Willie had written on it, but it was just a picture of his signature. So naturally, as the kids got there, they were running up, wanted to get Willie's autograph. And he explained that he didn't he didn't get a huge pension, and that he needed to subsidize his income by going around to different autographing parties where he was paid to sign autographs for people, and he couldn't do it at these speaking engagements that he had. And he felt bad because it was disappointing the kids, and he wanted them all to have a smile on their face and to feel good about Willie Mays and to be there. And that came out because during the dinner and while people were eating and before his talk, he got up and came around each table and shook hands with the kids and patted them on the head and laughed and talked with them. And the warmth just came out. And I had been to a number of these kind of charity events while I was in Connecticut, and you never saw the athletes come in, and they were nice, but they never went overboard like that and really got into the audience and wanted really to be part of it and make the audience happy with their appearance there and remember them. And that went on even after he made his talk, but his talk was very warm. He spent a lot of time talking to the audience and gave just an excellent talk, came down, and again, as I said, he just didn't get up and leave and get out of there. He hung around and talked to people for quite a while, and it was a true, you had to feel his personality and the kind of person that he was. And that's probably the most I can tell you about Willie Mays, because other than that, or probably you saw enough film clips of him that, you know, it would be the same as what I saw. And anyway, he was a special person.
So yeah, that was my grandfather's piece on Willie Mays, you know, a very interesting encounter where he got to get very up close and personal with him and meet him, which I think is something that I'll always be jealous of him for, and perhaps maybe wish I was born back then so I could have been able to experience it. But it's always fascinating because whenever you talk about players from Willie's time, and even before Willie's time, you're always a stone's throw away from some conversation about salaries. That the league was so much different back then, because when you just look at statistically the type of player that Willie Mays was, we're talking about players now who are, you know, who's going to be the next $500 million contract. That's Willie Mays. I mean, you really think about the type of player, the type of asset, and just the raw production that Willie Mays gives your team. In today's MLB, he might be a $600 million player.
I mean, right? He set, it was a league record at the time, just over $100,000 per year salary, and that's like that is like 8 times less than league minimum right now. Probably more, like, so that it's mind blowing to think about.
But it is special, and I was really happy that my grandfather mentioned it in his piece, just to, you know, point out the fact that, you know, once you reach stardom in professional athletics, you're a superstar, you're a celebrity, even maybe less so back then, but even then they were still a big deal and a big draw back then. And when you're in those types of positions, a lot of times most of the people you meet, you will never see again. You know, at least the people I meet here at Fordham, it's a big school. I'll still maybe see them again sometime at a reunion or whatever. You know, professional athletes meet hundreds of thousands and millions of fans around the world, and know damn well they're not going to see a lot of them ever again. So for any athlete that's able to leave an impression, a lasting, you know, experience on somebody when they meet them, in this, you know, scenario of Willie Mays going to every table and shaking the hands of every person that was in attendance and saying hello to all the kids and being very, very warm with everybody, you know, that just speaks volumes, because you kind of reach a point where when you have that level of stardom and you've proven that much in your career, you really don't have to go out of your way and do those sorts of things. You don't really have anything to prove to anyone, but there's certain people who, you know, their morality never changes, and their sweet, their warm personality never changes, and that's something that you hear all the time about Willie Mays. It's just how much of a people person he was.
And our next 2 clips, I think, encapsulate the impact he had just on people that watched him play and watched how tremendous he was, as well as the impact when you get the chance to meet Willie Mays. So those are 2 things covered in the next 2 ones we have coming up. Grace McCarron and Kurt Sipple, 2 other great members of WFUV. Grace reached out to her grandmother and got a really cool text that she read aloud, and then Kurt Sipple reached out to his aunt and got a really cool story about meeting Willie Mays. So they got those two clips coming up.
He was one of 3 Hall of Fame center fielders on the New York teams at the same time. There was even a popular song, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. It was probably one of baseball's finest moments. Practically every day, there was a picture on the back of the Daily News of one of the 3 of them making an impossible catch, and they were all sluggers. Having 2 of them leave for California was heartbreaking, but it was simply a magical time for baseball lovers.
My name is Kurt Zippel for WFUV Sports, and one memory from my family about Willie Mays from my aunt. She told me when she met Willie Mays when she was 10 or 11 years old, her dad, a big Giants fan, and she was also a big Giants fan, went up to him to say hi and talk to him and try to get a baseball signed. He had a little conversation at the restaurant that they were at and asked what her favorite players were, and she responded with Will Clark and Kevin Mitchell, and he said that he respected those decisions and that they were good friends of hers. Instead of responding with Willie Mays, she responded with the 2 different players, and she thinks back about it, and she thought it was really funny how he reacted to it. And then she shook his hand, and then he signed her baseball. And another fun tidbit from that story is that he was known for doodling on tablecloths, they said, at the restaurant that they were at. So after the dinner, the manager of the restaurant came up to them with the folded tablecloth and gave it to them to take home. So that is the Willie Mays story of my family, and I thought it was very cool to share.
I mean, the doodling on the napkin
Oh my God.
is awesome.
Talk about a keepsake, a doodled on napkin or a tablecloth from Willie Mays.
And it is funny to think about too, the piece that Grace read from her grandmother, how quickly the Dodgers and Giants left New York. You know, there's mixed emotions there. There's a lot of heartbreak.
Some
Some
sourness
but
too.
it feels like it almost amplifies their impact, because if you look at Willie Mays and the time he spent with the New York Giants, it's only 6 seasons in New York before they leave and they move to San Francisco, and then he's not back until his last couple of seasons with the New York Mets. That for a brief time there, I don't want to say brief, 6 years is a decent stretch, but for a time there, you have a really special trifecta of outfielders in New York. You have a really special trifecta of teams that were all really good.
Right.
And it had to have been just a magical time for baseball in New York. Our next clip comes from Ryan Gregoire, who is the former sports manager of WFUV. He reached out to his grandfather, so we've got a cool story from Ryan Gregoire's grandfather.
Hi, my name is Jeff O'Rourke. I am Ryan Gregoire's grandfather, and Ryan has asked me to say a few words about the passing of Willie Mays. Willie Mays was, to me, the greatest Major League Baseball player who ever lived. And I've had the great opportunity of seeing him in person, as well, of course, as seeing him many times on TV. I thought I'd just throw out a couple of stories to you to give you a little idea as to some of the things that I experienced with Willie during his career. In the beginning, Willie was called the Say Hey Kid, and a lot of people didn't know exactly how that came about. Where'd that nickname come from? Well, when he came up in 1951 from Alabama, he didn't know very many people in New York by their names, but he was a very friendly and outgoing guy. So he'd see somebody and he'd say, "Say hey!" And one of the writers with one of the New York newspapers picked up on it and said, "Oh, that's the Say Hey Kid over there." And after not too long a period of time, all the newspapers were picking it up, and everybody was referring to Willie Mays as the Say Hey Kid. He started in 1951 with the New York Giants, and it was quite an era in New York baseball. At that time, the Giants, the Dodgers, and the Yankees all played in New York City, and it was known as the period of Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. So that was Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, and Duke Snider, all 3 of whom eventually, thank goodness, were elected into the Hall of Fame as 3 of the greatest center fielders in the history of baseball. He was drafted in 1952 into the Army during the Korean War. So it was a period of time when he was trying to adjust, and he'd just come up to play baseball, and now they were sending him into the Army. but he went and did his duty. He missed about half of the season in 1952, and he missed the entire season in 1953. There's a lot of experts who say for that period of time that he lost, which was about 260 games, he would have hit another 50 to 60 home runs in his career. Who knows? It didn't happen, but it may have, and he could have beaten Babe Ruth's record before he retired. That didn't happen either. In New York, he was part of that famous, as I said, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. In 1957, those two teams in the National League, the Dodgers and the Giants, decided to stop playing in New York and moved out to California. San Francisco for the Giants, and the Dodgers played, of course, in LA, and they're both in those hometowns now. In 1951, his rookie year, some of you may have heard the stories about the famous Bobby Thompson home run when the Giants beat the Dodgers in a playoff game in the Polo Grounds. It was very famous. In fact, it became known as the shot heard around the world. Well, Willie Mays was on deck. If Bobby Thompson hadn't hit that home run, Willie Mays probably would have had an opportunity to be the hero of that game so early in his career. I attended the last game I ever played between the Giants and the Dodgers in the Polo Grounds in 1957. It was a sad day because I was a Dodger fan, and they were playing sort of the hated New York Giants. But it was the last opportunity anybody would see these two teams play together in the Polo Grounds. And that was a very memorable event, going to a baseball game where I was able to see Willie Mays play. Even though I was a Dodger fan, Willie Mays was my favorite player because he was so good and he did so much for baseball. It was okay that he played on a team that I didn't root for because I always rooted for him. I went to see Willie play in California as well after he got to San Francisco in Candlestick Park. In fact, I went to Candlestick Park on my honeymoon with my wife, and we went to, believe it or not, a doubleheader in Candlestick Park in May of 1967, and we got to see Willie play not one game, but two games there. That was a very exciting event because I had never been to Candlestick Park before that either. I continued on my viewing of Willie. I got to see him play his last game ever in 1973 at Shea Stadium. In fact, I took my mother and father and my wife, and we all went to see Willie say goodbye for the last time. He went on a couple of weeks later to play in the World Series with the Mets as well. But I felt like I had seen Willie in the beginning in New York in the Polo Grounds and had followed him through Candlestick Park and to Shea Stadium in New York. He played in 24 All-Star games. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. 24 All-Star games. He twice won the MVP award. He had 12 Gold Gloves, and he is still, to this day, number 6 all-time in hitting home runs. He has 660 home runs, which is an amazing feat. And a lot of experts say he would have hit a lot more in Candlestick Park as well, but because of the great winds that carried through that ballpark, a lot of them didn't reach over the fence. These are a few of the things that I experienced in my life and watched Willie be the great player that he became. I hope that you're hearing from some other relatives who are filling you in on things that they saw Willie do. And Ryan, thank you for asking me to participate in this.
Now we're joined by our first and only caller of the show. It's Will Talent, the assistant sports manager of WFUV. Will, thanks a lot for calling in, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's it's more of a somber meeting here, but at the same time, Willie Mays lived a great, long life. Lots of great stuff to talk about him, but thank you guys for having me on the show today.
That's good to hear from you, Will.
I mean, Will, I hear that you have a pretty cool story about Willie Mays and what he meant to your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad, so Willie Mays was my favorite player growing up. Oh, just an absolute icon. And my dad is from Mississippi. Willie Mays being from Alabama, there's a connection there with the southern part of the United States. But also, too, when my dad was growing up, there weren't like a lot of teams around. His favorite team growing up was the Cardinals, and the Braves, they didn't get there until, when they got there. My dad was already a Cardinals fan at that time, but just how much of a impact that Willie Mays had on all generations in baseball, especially when he was in his prime. And I guess that leads me to what my dad always says about Willie Mays. For any kind of memory that he has, all the accolades, all the stats, you name it, this one thing right here really stuck out to him from a baseball standpoint because I really haven't seen it, to be honest. I don't know off the top of my head, but Willie Mays wins the MVP 54 and then doesn't win it until 65. However, the MVP back in that time, I believe it was Bob Costas or Vince Scully, one of the two, but the MVP during Willie Mays' days was heavily impacted by your results in the regular season and if you made it to the World Series. So Willie Mays probably could have had, like 3, 4, maybe even 5 MVPs, but, to just make it to those World Series. So, and that was obviously, of course, during a time where it was just the winner of the American League, the winner of the National League, the best record from those leagues go to the World Series. So we missed out on Willie Mays MVPs, but what really stuck out to my dad was the fact that he was able to win it 11 years apart. That's actually, you really think about it, that's incredible, especially now. I don't know if we'll ever see something like that. We're going to have to see a true talent like Willie Mays was to have somebody win an MVP 11 apart, when he was super young and then when he was kind of creeping out of his prime. Just very incredible stuff. We see back-to-back MVPs. Like, look at Miguel Cabrera when he won his 2 MVPs, a Triple Crown year. But still, once again, there's something about 11 years apart and winning the Most Valuable Player award. That's just what really stuck out to my dad for the most part, the just pure talent that Willie Mays possessed for his entire career up until he retired with the Mets.
I mean, right, he was a model of consistency because 24 All-Stars in 23 seasons. I know there were a few years where they had, you could be named an All-Star twice in a season, and that's how that number makes sense. But you look at the Baseball Reference page for Willie Mays, and it is just season after season after season, he's one of the best players in the MLB, and even in the years that he's not winning MVP in those 11 years in between, it's still top 5, top 3 finishes.
Well, I was about to say that he was always in the running. I believe he won 2 MVPs, but then he also finished in the top 10 for MVP voting 10 times. So there was never a point where he was ever out of the running for the MVP. It was that consistency and that longevity that is just one of the most unreal things about him.
Oh, of course. And like I was saying, too, the reason that he probably doesn't have more is just because of how the voters saw the winner during that time. We all know how it changes. It's changed in the last 10 years, but now we go back 50, 60 years, and it was solely based on, going to the World Series for the most part. And Willie Mays was still able to put up incredible numbers, probably worth another MVP, but it's just the signs of the times, and it doesn't discredit anything that he did on the field whatsoever. And truly, I would say the epitome of the 5-tool baseball player.
Well, Will, we appreciate you calling in, sharing this story. Willie Mays, the favorite player of Will Tallent's father, and some really cool stuff there about Willie Mays, just his longevity, his greatness as a player. Will, thanks a lot, buddy.
Thank you, Will.
Lou, Jack, thank you so much for having me, boys. Have a good rest of the show. Fun talking some Willie Mays with you guys.
Big thanks again to Will Tallent.
We
that
love you,
is
buddy.
Our phenomenal. That's the great assistant sports manager at WFUV. Fantastic guy.
It doesn't get much better than Will Tallent, especially not only as a person, but from a baseball standpoint too. A real, diehard baseball guy. So it's always a good conversation when he chimes in.
We have one last first-hand account story about Willie Mays, and it was one that was pretty cool for me to do. My grandfather, Marco Orlando, grew up in Brooklyn, grew up a huge Brooklyn Dodgers fan, but also, as we said, grew up in a time where you had the three New York teams. He got to see Willie Mays play. He probably had to root against him a little bit as a diehard Brooklyn Dodgers fan, but my grandfather's a huge baseball fan, and you can tell here, just as yours does, still likes talking about the game to this day. And anytime you get to talk to someone that was there for that time, it's just a really cool piece of history to get to kind of jump in a plane and time travel back to. So our last first-hand account, my grandfather, Marco Orlando.
Lou Orlando, I'm joined by Marco Orlando, my grandfather. Papa, we've talked a lot about baseball throughout the years, and obviously Willie Mays is one of the best. Beyond the stat sheet, because I can look at the stat sheet or someone can tell me he was awesome, but beyond the stat sheet, like, what was it like to watch him? What made him so great?
I think the thing that made him so great, well, there were a couple of things. One, everything he did with what appeared to be little or no effort. And if you were watching him, it made you feel that, hey, I could do that, because it doesn't look that hard to do. The other thing that you noted about him is he always played the game like it was a game. There was a smile on his face. You could see that he really enjoyed the game, and he was playing it as if he was a 16 or 17-year-old, or as if he was, the guys I grew up with playing stickball on the street. So, I mean, in an era where the Dodgers would play the Giants 22 games a year, where the Dodgers and Giants literally hated one another and the fans did so accordingly. I could hate the Giants, but I don't think any Dodger fan could hate Willie Mays. It was just a joy to watch him. It was a game. It was a game that you played and a game that he played, and it was just a joy to watch him play. Of course, there were only 16 teams in the league, but I mean, he just made the game, whether the Giants beat the Dodgers or the Dodgers did, it was just a joy to watch him play. And of course, to see him on the same ball field with the likes of Jackie Robinson and Luke Snyder and Bill Hodges and the boys of summer was a triple pleasure. I mean, those games were great, even if you were, like, in the beginning, we could only listen on the radio, and you could read it. I mean, we would get the newspaper in the morning and we start reading the sports section. I don't think we ever got past the sports section. Nothing ever else interested us. But when you were at the ball field to watch these guys play the game was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And to think that the man only made, I think, his highest salary when he retired was $165,000. Is mind-boggling given today's game. I mean, he was not a showboater. I never saw him flip a bat. I mean, he did wear his cap, they said, one size shorter than it was supposed to, so that if he was running from first to second and rounding second, the cap would fly off, and of course he had the basket catch. And I won't even tell you about the catch. I mean, you find a clip of the catch and you will see, I think the amazing thing about that catch was not the catch itself, but the fact that he stopped on a dime, reeled, and threw the ball into the infield to keep the runners from advancing. And that was no mean feat. And to watch him stop in one step, I mean, he was running like a bat out of hell. But to see him stop, most ball players today would probably finish by running into the wall. He just stopped. To have the wherewithal to be thinking not about the catch, and I think he once said that. He wasn't worried about the catch. He knew he would make the catch, but keeping the runner from advancing. That's an amazing instinct for a ball player.
you grew up in like a golden age of New York baseball because you got to see DiMaggio, and then you got to see the big three of the center fielders, the Duke, Willie, and Mantle.
Yeah.
What was it like to be in that golden age of New York baseball? You have three teams, you have all these great players, and I guess if you can put your Dodgers bias aside or not, where did Willie rank in those center fielders and the players you watched at the time? Can you take me through?
I would give him that he had. I think each of them. Joe DiMaggio was great. I mean, great outfielder, great hitter. I saw Mickey Mantle. Again, great outfielder, great hitter, speed. I'm willing to concede that he had the five tools, and of all of the outfielders, he, based on his record, I mean, at 24 All-Star games, 12 Gold Gloves, a 309 batting average. When you combine all of that together, it would be hard not to consider him the best at that time. Whether he's the greatest of all time, I don't know, because all time hasn't passed. But yeah, I mean, not only those guys that I watched. I saw Ted Williams play. I saw Stan Musial play. I mean, we would go to Ebbets Field to watch Stan Musial take batting practice. I don't know if anybody shows up. I wouldn't go today, pay $50 to sit to watch somebody take batting practice. But we would go to St. Louis, to the Ebbets Field to watch when St. Louis was in, to watch Stan Musial take batting practice. If you could get a ticket to a Boston Yankee game, you sure as hell wanted to go see Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams in the same game. I mean, I don't remember. I don't think any era comes close to the greatness of those ball players. I mean, they're all Hall of Famers. We all came to play. They all came to play the game. Joe DiMaggio. When somebody once asked Joe DiMaggio, why is it when you're playing center field you go after everything the same way to make the catch, to do this, to this? And he said, because there's somebody in the stands who's seeing the Yankees and seeing me for the first time. I don't know if that's the way ball players play today. You know, Willie Mays would never flip a bat. I don't think he would ever show up a pitcher. Mickey Mantle would never do that. Jackie Robinson would never do that. It's a different game. It's a whole different world out there. But he was I have to say, he was one of the absolute joys to watch play.
I guess I'll just end. I'll end with this. Do you have any memories from getting to watch him, especially in person, that stick out? Like, obviously, there's a lot of famous plays with Willie, but for you personally, is there anything that you think about and you go, man, I got to see him do this, or I got to see him make this play?
I saw him a couple of times. And here's the interesting thing about that. Nothing really sticks out because he played the game the same way every time you went to see him. I think what sticks out in my mind is, I forget who was at bat, and he was on first, and I was in Ebbets Field. And I had a shot into right center field, and Mays was on first. And Mays went, and that field wasn't really that big. Mays went from first to third, and he looked like he wasn't really running hard. This actually Wolf, of course, and he made it with no problem. I mean, it was like he took 2 steps and he was on third base. But it looked like there was no effort to that. But he just knew playing the outfield, and I think he said it. He knew where the ball was going. He had that unique talent. I mean, if you watch the catch, he's running with his back. You can see his number. He's running with his back to the infield, and he's not looking for the ball. He's looking straight ahead of him. And at the last minute, you'll see him look up and make that catch, which I don't know how he did it. And like I said, and it looked easy. That was the amazing thing. It was like you can go to the ballpark any day and watch Willie Mays make that same catch.
Papa,
And you
thank
love
you
them
so
too.
much. This is so cool. Thank you for calling in and doing this.
You're welcome. Be well. Love you, Cal.
Love you.
How awesome is that?
I mean, how does it get any
It-
better than that?
I'll tell you, it doesn't. One of the quotes that stood out to me was when he's talking. He goes, nothing really stands out because he played the game the same way every single day, and he made everything look easy. I mean, that quote about it looked like he took 2 steps and he's on third base, but we're talking about the consistency. You talk about that era, like that DiMaggio quote is iconic about, I play the game hard every day because every day there's someone that's watching me and watching the Yankees for the first time. It seems like it's a similar thing with Mays.
Yeah, and you mentioned the importance that there's always people watching you. I think the other thing that was so special about Willie Mays, I thought it was fun how your grandfather mentioned that he was never a showboater, that he never was somebody that wanted all of the eyes on him, but he also liked to have fun. And at the same time, he also wanted to entertain the people that came to watch him play. And he mentioned the hat flying off every time he ran. I came here with a quote that I wanted to talk about because of how fun I thought it was. Willie did an interview with NPR back in 2010. And one of the things that he says, when I played ball, I tried to make sure everybody enjoyed what I was doing. And then he said, I made the clubhouse guy fit me a cap that when I ran, the wind gets up in the bottom and it flies right off. People love that kind of stuff. Even from the beginning, because like I said in the beginning of this, show, that he started playing professional baseball when he was 16. So he starts so young, plays a really long career to where he's honestly quite old as a professional, and still that inner child in him was always there in the way that he played. And I think that's another thing that's so special, is that he was somebody who just cared about winning baseball games, being the best player that he could be, but also entertaining the people that came to watch him play.
And he'll go down as one of the greats, I think, any way you slice it. He is one of the greatest center fielders of all time. He's one of the greatest outfielders of all time. And he's one of the greatest baseball players, period, of all time. And to use this phrase, it's a phrase that I like to use with him, you can't tell the story of baseball without Willie Mays.
No, you
and
cannot.
that is, there aren't that many people in the game that you can truly say, we can't tell the story of this game without him. But he's in that short elite list.
And you can't tell the story of several aspects of baseball without him. You can't tell the story of baseball as a whole. You can't tell the story about players during the civil rights era without Willie Mays, because obviously he wasn't the first one, but he was in that era of baseball players where not every trip to the ballpark was a pleasant one. And that's another thing to just have so much respect for, is any player that had showed greatness during that time, despite also some of the societal outlooks at the time and some of the treatment that those players that looked like Willie Mays endured, just to see the greatness that spawned from him throughout some times that were difficult is another thing that I think is just so admirable.
The Hall of Famer Willie Mays dies at the age of 93, and I will say again, the bright side of all of this is getting to hear all these stories, and it's for the people that talked, I think it's a walk back in memory lane, and you can kind of see them get transported to this spot when they were a lot younger and their glory days of watching baseball. For us, I know it's the way I feel when I talk to my grandfather about baseball a lot. It's like you get taken back to this really cool era of baseball in New York, where it's almost hard to fathom 3 New York teams and a myriad of Hall of Famers. And so just to think about that, to think about Ebbets Field as a kid that grew up in Brooklyn, to have a field there in my neighborhood where a professional team played, it's kind of wild to get taken back to that era of baseball. And obviously the New York Giants Polo Grounds, like those are 2, even though they haven't been around for a while, those are still things that you hear talked about a lot, and they're part of our lexicon as baseball fans.
And the other thing is, especially for people closer to our age and basically any era of people that missed the cutoff of seeing Willie play, it's like once they are no longer with us, or even while Willie was still alive, but we weren't obviously alive to see him play, it almost gives you this larger than life feeling. It's almost this prophet type feeling almost when you hear somebody that gets talked about the way that Willie Mays does from the people that were alive to see him. For you to have not been around to witness it yourself, and then you get to hear those stories from people that actually experienced that greatness, it almost feels like how was this a real human being that once existed?
Well, this was really cool to put together. It was awesome to hear all these stories. I have to issue some big thank yous to Grace McCarron, Kurt Sipple, and the former sports manager of WFUV, Ryan Gregoire. Thank you for reaching out to your families and sending us those clips. To the assistant sports manager, WFUV, Will Talent, thank you for calling in that story about your dad, his favorite player. That was awesome. And last but certainly not least, gigantic thank yous to both of our grandparents for taking a lot of time to talk to us about Willie Mays and all their memories growing up. This was, I'm sure I can speak for you as well, this was awesome.
Oh, it was an absolute blast. A really, really special experience for sure.
For Jack Warner, Lou Orlando, once again, remembering the life of Willie Mays, a baseball legend and a Hall of Famer.
And the Say Hey Kid.
Thank you all.